Detroit Lions training camp is officially here. I'm joined by Twentyman and Motorcycle Mike O'Hara. I'm Dannie Rogers. We will get our first look at these Detroit Lions July 23rd, bright and early at practice. That's when we'll hear from head coach Dan Campbell as well. Tim and Mike, the expectations for these Detroit Lions this season, so exponentially high. What is making these expectations so high, and how do the Detroit Lions deliver on them?
Well, it's how they finished last year. We all know that won 8 of the last 10 games. And then what they added in the offseason to build up, for the upcoming season. So I think it's a combination of things.
The defense is going to be considerably better, especially in the secondary. But there's one other move that I thought was really, really important for this football team, and it wasn't a player contract. It wasn't anything else. It was the return of offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. You look what he did last year, not only for the offense as a whole. They were 4th in total offense. They were 5th in points. They were 8th in passing. They were top 11 in running. They were really, really good. Red zone, they were top 5. Third down, they were top. It was a really good offense, and he orchestrated it all. And you look at what he did with Jared Goff in the season Jared had. I think that's a direct reflection of Ben Johnson and him working with Jared, building this offense. So I just think that was such an important move. He was, I think, going to get that Carolina job if he had gone through and wanted to do it. But he said, look, I still got some unfinished business here. I've still got some stuff to learn, and kudos to him to come back. And, there's one of 32 jobs as a head coach. Not a lot of guys would turn that down, just knowing that you've got some time to develop more and finish some unfinished business here in Detroit.
I think there's a little bit of loyalty too there. They promoted him in the middle of a season. Now they didn't give him the title 2 years ago, but they gave him the responsibility and the work with the head coach calling the plays and all that. And I think he sort of paid some of that back. I really do.
I think the loyalty will also trickle down into these players, and especially the new faces that are on this team. It is go time for these undrafted rookies and these draft picks, their first experience of an NFL training camp. Which are the new faces that you're most excited to watch once training camp kicks off?
Well, to me, it's Jahmyr Gibbs because I like running backs. I really do. And I go back to when they drafted Billy Sims, when they drafted Barry Sanders, guys like that. A running back can add something to just like that, unlike any other player. Just because it's just the way that all of a sudden they got a speed, they get into a crease, bingo, they're gone. It's a touchdown. It changes everything. And so maybe it's a little bit of sentiment, but I really want to see what this kid can do.
It really touched his heart. Who's touching your heart?
It is. Well, Sam Laporta, I thought, had a terrific spring. The second-round pick, the tight end. I think he's going to have an opportunity to play a big, big role in this offense. You look at what the tight end position did for Detroit last year, set a franchise record with 12 touchdowns, and that was after trading T.J. Hawkinson, too. They were still productive at that position. And I just look at him in the spring. He became a real weapon in the red zone, particularly for all 3 of the quarterbacks, and he's just got an ability to separate at the top of his route. He creates space, and we saw that all spring. Now, the pads are going to come on. It's going to be a little bit different. He's not going to have free releases and everything else. And so, and we all know that tight end position is so hard to learn. It's probably the second hardest behind quarterback for rookies to learn because you're learning 3 different positions and the blocking schemes and the protections. It's really, really difficult. You very rarely see a tight end come into the league as a rookie and tear it up. But I think this young man has an opportunity to be a really productive piece early on in his career just because of how Ben Johnson uses the tight end position and just how explosive this offense is going to be, having a key around some other elements around him.
Well, with his receiving ability, and we just saw how effortlessly he changed, could change position and change direction. I don't think, just don't complicate him too much. Let him be what he is first, a receiver, and then get into all that other stuff and just sort of layer it on as you go through the season.
Yeah.
Mike and Tim, you both mentioned offensive players. However, defensively, when we talk about that side of the ball, they struggled early last season. They did end up making the end of the season highlight reel. Why will that side of the ball be better this season, even though we haven't seen them take the field just yet?
Well, I'd just like to give you 3 guys from last year's draft. And look, once a year there's the toys under the tree and all that, and you don't always get what you want. Excuse me. Detroit Lions got what they wanted last year. You just look at the top 3 with Aiden Hutchinson. I got some notes down here. 9.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. That's playmaking. That's you add that to any defense, it's going to be better. It's going to be markedly better, and it improved as the season went on. Kirby Joseph, 4 interceptions, and here's the one that no one could have predicted. James Houston played 7 games, had 8 sacks.
Yep.
That's production that you don't often get in a draft.
You know, for me, I agree with Mike. You've got to love some of the young pieces that are going to become your core pieces on defense. But I think Brad Holmes was really smart to add some veteran pieces to that mix. So now you've got a good mix defensively of veteran guys, proven guys. I'm talking about a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who in 12 games last year was tied for the NFL lead with 6 interceptions. A guy that can play nickel at an elite level. He can go back and play safety. He did both in Philadelphia. He can even play in the box, which he did. He played over 200 snaps at box safety, free safety, and nickel last year. So talk about a guy that can step in and be versatile. And then Cam Sutton, a guy who's done it at a high level for a long time in Pittsburgh, a really good solid defense. Now you've improved, that outside cornerback spot. Emmanuel Mosley, a guy who was starting at the outside cornerback spot in San Francisco before the ACL injury. It looked like he was ramping up, getting pretty close to returning, so we'll see when he comes back. But just in those 3 guys alone, I think you've improved your secondary tremendously. And then, you get a guy like Tracy Walker back, and people maybe forget that he only played in 3 games last year. He was hurt week 3 in Minnesota with the Achilles. He's on track to return too. So between the young guys that Mike mentioned and some of the veteran guys that they've brought in, I just think defensively there's a really nice mix now between young guys and veteran guys and a lot of guys that can make plays.
You look at those guys up front too, like John Kaminsky and Isaiah Buggs, and those guys, those are football players. Those are guys who know how to play the game, and they're accountable. They know, the guy next to you, he knows that he's going to do his job, and you'll be able to do your job. And I think that's a really valuable asset to have.
Glue pieces. That's what I reference those guys. Glue pieces to the roster. A guy like John Kaminsky, he doesn't wow you with his statistics, but if you watch film and you watch the Washington game and you watch Aiden Hutchinson with the 3 sacks and all the praise and the Billie Jean dance and all that stuff. That was set up by John Kaminsky on 2 of those sacks because of the games that he did, the double teams that he took in the stunt. Those sacks were a direct result of how hard and tough John Kaminsky plays inside and makes everyone around him better. You look at last year, first 7 games of the season, they were allowing 32 points per game. You look at the last 10 when they were 8-2, they were allowing just over 20. They were 11th in the NFL in points per game allowed. There was a really big improvement there because of some of the young guys Mike talked about playing. And I think they have a chance to start maybe at the latter part this year and be one of those kind of middle of the pack, maybe top 15 type defenses if they stay healthy because of what they've added.
And they were doing that at a time when they were playing games that counted. I mean, they were trying to get into the playoffs, and they just missed by a whisker. But to your point, those glue pieces were holding them together at a time when you had a chance to make a legitimate run for the playoffs.
See what you did there, Mike. It's
glue pieces. I can't wait. I was going to say, I can't wait to steal it.
You guys are really hyping up some position groups on defense. I want to know, what is the position group you have the most confidence in? Day 1 comes for training camp that there's going to be no surprises for you.
Go
easy.
ahead.
It's easy. And I know me and Mike both agree on this one.
The quarterback.
Hey, I got a lot of confidence in Jared Goff too, but for me, it's the offensive line. I mean, you look at Frank Ragnow is arguably the best center in the game. Penei Sewell is arguably the best right tackle in the game. Taylor Decker is consistently a top 10 left tackle. Jonah Jackson, their left guard, he's already been to a Pro Bowl entering his 4th season. And getting Big V back on at right guard, I think, is huge too. He missed all of last season with a back injury, but if you look at his 2021 season, didn't allow a sack in 16 games that year, played really, really well. And the amazing thing was how good this offensive line is, which I think it's Philadelphia and Detroit, top 2 in the league. They have never played with their top 5 the last 2 years. Think about that.
And I also think they've got backups there too, Matt Nelson and Graham Glasgow. Those are starting caliber players just waiting to get a chance to play. Yeah, to me, the position, or the group, I'm calling the quarterback the group, and it's Jared Goff.
Yeah.
I mean, he is in command of this team right now as his 3rd year here. I don't think he could be more comfortable in his position at any time in his career. Really, he's playing on a team from the front office down to the rookies believe in him, and want him to lead them in whatever direction they go in. It's going to be him. And look, last year, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The last 10 games, was it that he didn't have a turnover?
324 straight passes he hasn't thrown. 5th longest active streak in the NFL.
I do not like you guys talking like that. Knock on wood.
I should have brought a pen to write it down. I'm going to start interviewing you.
And he got his offensive coordinator back in Ben Johnson, which you both mentioned earlier on. I want to say one of the highlights of this training camp for Detroit, 2 weeks of joint practices back to back. Tim, we were talking earlier, that's never happened while you've been covering this team for the last 87 years?
Yeah, it's unique.
I can't remember two. Can
No,
you?
no. I mean, they've always, last year they went on the road to Indianapolis. We've gone on the road to Pittsburgh. We've had the New England Patriots and I think the New York Giants here
Yeah.
in different years. But to have two in a row, and I think one of the unique things with hosting this, and I had David Correo, who's the defensive assistant, outside linebackers coach on my podcast a few weeks ago, and he made a really interesting point that a few years ago when we faced the New York Giants with a joint practice, Romeo Okwara was giving the Lions offensive linemen just a ton of trouble through that week. And then when it came cut time, Romeo didn't make the roster with the Giants. And so they had remembered him from that time, and that's how Romeo was picked up here, and obviously went on to have a double-digit sack season, lead them one year, and become a really productive player. And so I think that's maybe one of the things that people don't think about is now you've got a Giants team that's pretty good, a Jaguars team that's pretty good. And it's going to be tough for some guys to make that roster. I think not only do you get the great work and the competition and it ramps up, but guys get tired of hitting each other. And you can tell just the level of competition raises with joint practices. But from the coaching point, too, you get a really good inside look at some other guys. So come cut time, you suffer some injuries, some guys are on their practice squads, whatever it may be. I think one of the byproducts of the joint practices, you really get a great inside look at other teams' rosters and how they perform, and maybe that can help you out in the future as well.
And also, just to look back a little bit, the Lions beat both of those teams last year. They beat the Giants on the road. They beat the Jaguars 40-10 at Ford Field. Those were playoff teams too. So you probably sort of had a feeling for where you stand with your roster.
For sure.
And Dan Campbell loves joint practices. I just remember him talking in Indy, just how much it's ramped up, the physicality. He's like, we're going to find out a lot about our team here in
I think
Indy this
C.J.
week.
Gardner-Johnson might be talking a little bit trash during those.
He loves going on the Twitter. Yes, he will.
And that's what it is. It's just the competition level, the pass rush drills and the wide receivers versus cornerbacks. It just ramps up. Now, they do that here in Detroit, but the physicality, everything just ramps up. The trash talking. You want to win those drills. You want to put good film out there. 7-on-7s, just everything ramps up with joint practice, which is why I love it so much.
And the fans will be ramped up too. You have to have tickets to watch these practices. That's how many people they're anticipating showing up. It's amazing the excitement that's around this team.
It's real. I mean, it's not just locally either. It's nationally. I mean, people are picking this team to win the division for the first time since '93, to be a real player in the NFC. And I think if they stay healthy and they continue to play as well, both offensively and defensively, as they did at the end of last year, I think they got a real shot to be really good. Let's just put it this way. I've covered this team for 15 years. This is the most excited about a team heading into camp that I've been.